From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Thanks for tuning in and making Washington Watch part of your day. Well, coming up on this Thursday edition, winter storms may bookend the week here in Washington, D.C. So despite a late arrival, Congress is working to wrap up business today and get out of town before the next storm arrives. We'll get the latest from Capitol Hill a little bit later. And the world's elite gathered once again in Davos, Switzerland this week, where the top concern was the economy, right? No. Global conflict? No. Controlling what they call disinformation.
For the global business community, the top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation.
That was European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Now, that almost sounds like an audio reading from George Orwell's 1984. Larry Taunton, Executive Director of the Fixed Point Foundation, attended the forum to see what was going on, and he joins us in just a moment to tell us about it. The House Homeland Security Committee held a hearing yesterday on safeguarding dissident voices from foreign regimes here in the United States.
Transnational repression will continue to be used as a tool to silence views that run afoul to those of autocratic governments if all branches of our government do not step up and work to solve this challenge. We must find a way to effectively deter nation states from engaging in transnational repression.
That was committee chairman, Texas Congressman August Pfluger. What this is, you have people fleeing to the United States who are being persecuted abroad, and the long arm of those repressive regimes track them down here, like China and Iran. FRC's Bob Food testified before the committee, and he joins me later here in studio. And then there was Sloppy Joe, I mean Morning Joe.
And he's got Ben Carson out there, comparing him to the second coming of Jesus too. Like Alex, do we have that Ben Carson thing?
Oh my gosh.
Where it just
the biblical King David.
Compared him to King David, a man after God's own heart.
Well, following Donald Trump's historic victory in the Iowa caucuses on Monday night and the fact that evangelical voters made it possible, MSNBC and the rest of the leftist media has come unglued.
All the things that we think about electability, about, what are people gaming out, or none of that matters when you believe that God has given you this country, that it is yours, and that everyone who is not a white conservative Christian is a fraudulent American.
That was MSNBC's Joy Reid. Well, expect this Christian bashing to last for the next 10 months. Dr. Ben Carson, who last time I checked was actually white, but is a Christian, joins me later. Our word for today comes from Genesis chapter 42. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. Joseph's brothers were living in fear of their circumstances because of the guilt of unconfessed sin. Why was it unconfessed? The same reason they committed the act of selling their brother into slavery. They didn't fear or reverence God. When you do not fear God, we live in fear of everything else. Fear of man, fear of events, fear of life, just plain fear. To join us in our journey through the Bible, go to frc.org/Bible. I also want to invite you to join us for the National Gathering for Prayer and Repentance here in Washington, D.C., Wednesday, January 31st, 7:30 a.m. in the morning at the Museum of the Bible. To find out how you can join us, even online, go to praydc.org. That's praydc.org. Well, it is January, so that means the leftist cadre of politicians, CEOs, and billionaires have gathered in Davos, Switzerland for the 54th Annual World Economic Forum. The ongoing wars in Gaza and Ukraine loom over this year's proceedings, but the world leaders who flew by private jet, followed by a private helicopter ride to the sleepy ski town in the Alps, have much to say about climate change as well as their new favorite panic item, misinformation. Now, what else was among the chatter of the self-described elite? Well, joining me now to discuss this is author, columnist, and executive director of the Fixed Point Foundation, Larry Taunton, who kind of crashed the forum this week. Larry, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, Tony.
So first, let me just ask you a question. Why Davos, Switzerland? Why not Detroit, Michigan, or Los Angeles, California?
You know, that is a question everybody asks who doesn't fly a private jet, because I have to tell you, it is not an easy place to get to. You know, I would have preferred that they had held it in Atlanta, but they didn't ask me.
So give us a glimpse of what you saw this year at the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting, Tony. About 70% of the WEF, and they say the WEF, the World Economic Forum presentations, sessions are online. But I think it's that other 30% that are very important. And also, I really feel it's important to get a feel for the ethos of something like this. And with that in mind, I go and I just kind of move among the WEFers and engage them in conversation. And it's endlessly fascinating. But one of the things that really comes through to me, Tony, is that there wasn't any mention of these farm uprisings, these farmers that are they're protesting all over Europe and have done so in Canada as well. There's no mention of any of that. There's a great focus on Ukraine. There's a great focus on Putin. And though it is unspoken, there is a great focus and, dare I say, anxiety about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I saw, I guess it was not quite 2 weeks ago, the Economic Forum released their survey of concerns, top 10 concerns. And the top one was misinformation, disinformation. Second, extreme weather. Third, societal polarization. Fourth, cyber insecurity. And on down with economic downturn being number 9. And I was just comparing the exit polling from the voters in Iowa. It was almost the exact opposite. Their biggest concern, in fact, migration was number 8 for the World Economic Forum. That was the number 1 issue when it came to the voters in Iowa, which I think is a snapshot of what people are feeling, thinking in America, followed by the economy. Doesn't seem to be affecting those folks in Davos.
No, and it's because, as you might expect, Tony, there's a tremendous disconnect with these people, with the way they live, with, some of them have been in government for decades. I mean, take somebody like John Kerry. I mean, he has no idea what life is like for ordinary people around the world. Now, one of the news items that really captured the WEF this week was I think it was yesterday, that the new president of Argentina, Javier Milei, he came and gave them a piece of his mind. And he represents populists, not just in Argentina. He's become something of a rock star, really, with common people all over the world. But he was invited to speak, and he didn't waste the opportunity to tell them what he really thinks.
Yeah, I saw you've been commenting on him on social media, but I saw he actually flew commercial to get there.
Yes.
and he is kind of like another version of Donald Trump. I mean, he's just he's bringing a perspective that I think is reflective of a lot of people. I mean, he was going after socialism. I mean, he was hitting this stuff pretty hard.
Yeah, he really was. It's interesting. He's even borrowed Donald Trump's phrase. He says, "Make Argentina great again." And I as a historian, I can't recall when that golden age in Argentinian history was, but his point is nonetheless made, and that is to say, at least make Argentina a place that is free from globalists, free from their anti-human agenda. And that's something I would really want your listeners, your viewers to understand, Tony, is that the WEF is fundamentally anti-human human. And when they start talking about misinformation and disinformation, that's just code. That's just Orwellian speak for ending free speech. And their primary target is to go after X or Twitter.
Right. And I saw, speaking of control, silencing, World Health Organization, Secretary General Tedros was there. And of course, they want to clamp down on anyone who would challenge their global power grab when it comes to pandemics and health crises and emergencies and such. You mentioned about being on the ground there, being able to have the conversations and hear what people are saying that you don't get when you're watching online. What were some of the buzzwords that you heard as you were engaging in conversations there?
Well, interestingly, Tony, the feeling you get when you engage with them is that they're absolutely clueless. That's my buzzword for them. It isn't one they use for themselves, but it is one that I will use and apply to them. Clueless. They don't seem to even really be aware that there are people who don't agree with what they're doing. And it was interesting because when you hear them talk about say a place like Twitter, which they refer to as toxic, that is one of their buzzwords. What they really mean by that is any place is toxic that there are people there who dissent with them. So here I am in their midst, Tony, and you kind of have to picture this. They assume I'm a WEFer just like they are. And then when I begin to push back on, the globalist agenda just a little bit, you can see they don't really even know how to respond to me because they're in safe spaces all the time.
They're never challenged.
It's kind of the accusation against Christians forever, that you live in the family life center and you don't actually gauge any unbelievers. Well, that's what these people are, except they're members of a godless, secular cult.
Right. Well, speaking of it, we've got about a minute left. Does faith play into what takes place there at the forum? Is that even acknowledged?
Not at all. Not at all. Well, but I will say this: they're very clever about inviting people with whom they might disagree, in an effort to give the impression that they are listening to dissenting voices. But I assure you, they are not.
Yeah.
They're only listening to each other.
Well, Larry Taunton, I want to thank you for taking time to join us as you're on your way back to the States. Always interested in your perspective, what you're picking up when you're on the ground over there.
Listen, it's great to be with you, Tony. You take care.
All right, Larry Taunton. You can find out more. Go to TonyPerkins.com and follow the links over. All right, I mentioned the World Health Organization, and as we've been talking about all week, there is a comment period on this pandemic accord, at least one portion of it, as it pertains to the pharmaceutical aspects of them clamping down, attacking our national sovereignty. You can respond and put in a comment. It kind of helps slow the process down and raise awareness. So just text the word WHO to 67742. You'll get a link, and then you can make your comment. All right, don't go away. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk to Bob Fu, who testified before Congress yesterday. That's coming up next on this edition of Washington Watch. Don't go away.
everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us on this Thursday. Again, if you would like to make a comment during this comment period, which ends on Monday, regarding the World Health Organization, text the word WHO to 67742. We need your voice in these important policy matters. And I'm going to continue to talk about the WHO. It's frightening what they are proposing, and it goes in with just what we were talking about with Larry Taunton. It's this globalist approach, and we have to push back on it, stand against it. Text the word WHO, WHO, to 67742. All right, among the many threats to U.S. national security is brazen intimidation by nation states or their proxies. Now, we've seen this over the past year with the secret Chinese police stations on U.S. soil, as well as the Iranian regime's efforts against former U.S. officials. Now, to address transnational oppression in the United States, the House Homeland Security Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Law Enforcement, and Intelligence held a hearing yesterday titled Safeguarding Dissident Voices. And Bob Fu, Family Research Council Senior Fellow for International Religious Freedom, testified before the subcommittee, and he joins me now in studio. Bob, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you, Tony, for having me.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Okay, let's talk about yesterday's hearing. You testified regarding the Chinese Communist Party's repression of religious freedom. And it's interesting, during my time on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, as I was having conversations primarily with Uyghurs who were here in the United States, they were fearful of the Chinese government and the agents that they have on this soil.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, while the Communist Party has really persecuted against religious minorities, Uyghurs, Christians, Tibetans, to the worst level we have not seen in 40 years. And their transnational repression effort has also growing rapidly in the past few years. I mean, not only they are, engaging brutal, even kidnapping, from Thailand to, but also in the U.S., of course.
So let's talk about what's happening here in the United States when it comes to those who have fled to this country for freedom. How China, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, what are they doing to them here?
Oh, the CCP has used its agents and used its hired thugs. by engaging like physical intimidation, harassment, to what do we call the swatting and cyber threats
and demonstrating in front of people's houses.
Yeah, like in my
in
front of
your
my
case,
house. Yeah, many
for over a month.
Yeah, over 2 months. Over 2 months, my wife and I and our whole family had to be evacuated by the FBI and the local law enforcement.
But not everybody has the benefit of federal protection. So you've got there's so much fear among those who are here in the United States when they have these Chinese agents pursuing them.
Yeah, the only purpose of the CCP is to silence all these voices, these dissident voices in American soil. I mean, we have I'm a friend who was a former Tiananmen Square students leader in California, and he has a very popular show on the YouTube critical of the Communist Party, basically when his house was also being besieged, preventing his 2 children from going to school. And, when he reported to the California police, and the police knocked his door and said, "Sir, the so-called protester said, if you shut down your YouTube and be silent, they will leave."
That's amazing.
Very clearly.
It's amazing. Yeah. So what was the outcome in yesterday's hearing? What else took place?
I hope, with that bipartisan approach led by Chairman Floger.
There was bipartisan concern.
Yeah.
But from both parties.
Yes.
They recognize there's a problem.
They do, yeah.
Okay.
I think both sides of the aisle recognize that. But I did point out, my first recommendation is to have the DOJ restore the Trump administration's policy called the China Initiative. That basically giving the law enforcement the sufficient tool to specifically, sort out and target those perpetrators of the CCP's transnational repression. But almost really a month after this administration came to power, and mysteriously that initiative was canceled. That was a very bad decision.
Yeah, that is a whole other topic as to the connections between this administration and
CCP
China.
won that round.
Right.
Yeah.
Bob, we just got about a minute left. I want to ask you about, in fact, last time we were together, it was a dinner with Taiwanese officials. The chairman of the parliament was with us. We had dinner. And over this past weekend, the Taiwanese people went to the polls, overwhelmingly electing a pro-independence, pro-democracy party, William Lai. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, both William Lai and Ambassador B.K. Shaw, with whom you had dinner too, they won this election. That's a direct rebuke to Beijing by the Taiwanese people. Because
they're not backing down. They're not being intimidated by China, are they?
No. Despite of their military threats, airplane.
Why is that?
In.
Did they see more than we do the value of freedom? Because they live in the shadow of communist China.
Oh, they appreciate every day, the kind of freedom under the shadow of communist threats. Every day, they want to appreciate that. They want to say no to the CCP's, pressure and threats. So I think that's why, against all odds, the CCP did not even kind of hide their preference to the pro-Beijing candidates, and yet they elected William Lai.
Final question, Bob. We're up against this break, but and I know you work very closely with our Taiwanese friends. Do they feel like America is reliable in this standoff with China?
I think both of the president, William-elect William Lai, and VP-elect Ambassador Shaw are universal value American, the candidates, and they were actually both like you sanctioned by
I know
the
that. I'm in the part. We started a club. That's right. Well, I appreciate their courage, and I appreciate yours as well. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bob Fu, a member of the FRC team. All right, don't go away. Speaking of Congress, we're going to get an update from the Hill. as Congress works to get out of town. So don't go away. More Washington Watch straight ahead.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us. Well, members of Congress, many of them scrambling to leave Washington before yet another winter storm. But before departing, Congress had to deal with a big issue, continuing resolution keeping the lights on for government, averting a partial government shutdown that would come at midnight Friday. That's tomorrow night. But what does that mean? Where does this put us? What's next? Joining me to give us the latest from Capitol Hill is Oklahoma Congressman Kevin Hern. He serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, and he's the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. He represents the 1st Congressional District of the Sooner State. Congressman, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Tony, it's great to be with you.
All right, so this is another CR. That's a continuing resolution, short-term spending bill. This gets us to the first part of March. What's in this?
Well, certainly continued to spend at the previous levels. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, policy writers that are all the things that we hate as conservatives, you know, the DEI issues, the abortion travel issues, all these things are in these continuing resolutions. That's why it's so important that we actually get our appropriation bills done in order. Ever since I've been here for almost 6 years, we've talked about regular order. I'm sure you've talked with member after member that said that.
Almost 20 years I've been talking about that.
Well, if you look at Speaker Johnson, and I know we love football and you guys love LSU football, but you know he really got.
But before I was an LSU fan in Louisiana, I was an Oklahoma fan as I grew up there. So
yeah,
I'm partial.
Yeah, so we get this, and so the analogy I like to use is that Speaker Johnson was brought in at the 2-minute warning, and not in the first half, but in the second half, and asked to win the game, or at least keep it continued. So we're in overtime. We tied the game. We're in overtime. We're continuing. But we want to win the game, and winning the game is really getting our budget done on time or early, and getting the appropriation cycle back on time or early, and do that with the leverage that we don't go home until we do. The American people are sick and tired of these continuing resolutions.
I would agree. So March has to be a red line because we had a CR before Christmas, which I supported because I've seen those omnibus that have come out of those Christmas, backdrop where we've had Congress's back up to the Christmas break. But here's another one. We're continuing kicking the can down the road to March. Now the House has passed 7 of the 12 appropriations bills. You've got 5 more to go, but the Senate has to act.
Yeah, I think people forget, all attention's on the House because we do have the power of the purse. But, we know that, we, like you said, we worked, fervently all through last year, got 7 appropriation bills passed out of the House, that represented some 81% of government spending. That was under Speaker McCarthy's leadership. And, we also negotiated H.R. 1, which is our energy policy, H.R. 2, our border policy. And that H.R. 2, that border policy, is front and center right now with Senator Langford working on border policy on the Senate side. But we've now got to come together, work with our Democrat colleagues on the appropriation bills and get those done between March 1st and March 8th. And it's going to change. We're going to change our schedule. We're going to have to get back here and do our part to work that week that we were supposed to be back in our districts the last week of February. We're going to get back up here and work. And we got to make sure we get the appropriations done on time before the next CR hit. And
then secondly is make sure the Senate does their part, because if the House goes through this process and the Senate doesn't, I don't think the House should accept another continuing resolution.
Well, that's where I'm at. I've been opposed to them just because I think it's irresponsible, and that's my take on it, irresponsible. I came here being a fiscal conservative under the guidance, and the person that got me involved in politics was Senator Tom Coburn, House Congressman. And
he used to track all the wasteful spending. I remember his waste book that he would keep up with all of the frivolous spending that the government was involved in, and it was a thick book.
Well, and I think part of the problem is we don't follow our own laws. I mean, the 1974 Budget Control Act, there's a lot of conversation about we should change it. Well, we shouldn't change something that we're not actually even trying to do. The only thing that prevents us from hitting those deadlines is us. And so, that's my concern as we continue to kick this can down the road, is that we're now, for the American people, we're halfway through the 2024 budget season, and we're just now doing the appropriations process. We need to get our appropriators working on 25, not still working on 6 months left of 24.
Yeah. Good. That's a good point. I mean, if we get this done in March, will we have time to meet the deadlines for next year?
Well, certainly, as chair of the Republican Study Committee, we're pushing on the budget. Constitutionally, we're supposed to have our budget done by April 15th. We're going to have the RSC budget done by March 15th. And the reason we can do this efficiently, effectively, and early or on time is because we do them year after year. Right. That's the problem with Congress. We don't have any muscle memory of actually doing these. If we actually did these budgets on time and the appropriations on time, we would have the muscle memory and the ability to do it.
Excellent point. It's been so long since it's been done, people don't remember how to do it, because so many people here have never seen that process work as it should, as you pointed out. Congressman Kevin Hern, always great to see you. Thanks so much for giving us an update.
Thanks, Tony. Safe travels.
All right. Congressman Kevin Hern of Oklahoma. We really do. We've got to get back to the way government should work. And it begins with fiscal responsibility. And we have not gone through the regular order it's been over 20 years since they've gone through the entire process as they should. All right, don't go away. When we come back, all right, it's that time of year. It's election season, and so it's, according to MSNBC, Christian bashing. Dr. Ben Carson joins me next here on Washington Watch. Don't go away.
The world is hurting. Streets are filled with crime. Families are broken. Sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible devotion. Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us. The website, tonyperkins.com. All right, I haven't mentioned this yet in the program. We haven't talked about the border today, but it's going to continue to be an issue, and we want to make sure it is addressed. So help us out. Text the word border to 67742, border to 67742, because we want members of Congress to know that this is an important issue for you, especially as we move into this election year. And speaking of that, this election season is well underway now with the Iowa caucuses having taken place earlier this week. And the left and their legacy media collaborators have ratcheted up their attacks on Christians who participate in the political process. Now, we've seen this before, all right? This is not new. But here's what you need to understand. These attacks are designed to silence and intimidate Christians. And as I said many times, courage breeds courage. As followers of Christ, we cannot allow these attacks to cause us to shrink back and be silent. We know what is true. We know what is right. And we need to be willing to state that. Joining me now to discuss this is a man who always stands bold for his faith. It's been an honor to work with him, especially when he was in the Trump administration as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. He was a 2016 presidential candidate, and before that, a pioneering neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins. He is now the founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute, and he's a great friend, Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Carson, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's always good to be with you, and thank you for being so courageous yourself and being a patriot.
Well, it's a lot easier when I've got others that are willing to stand, and you've done that. And I've talked about this before. You could have easily left the scene after the Trump administration ended, but you've stepped up and you've started your own organization that's helping teach children about America, instilling patriotic values. And you're out there talking, and as a result, you're being attacked by the media. I want to play a clip from Joe Scarborough from Morning Joe. and his attack on you, and I want to allow you to respond to that. Play the clip from Joe Scarborough.
And he's got Ben Carson out there, you know, comparing him to the second coming of Jesus too. Like Alex, do we have that Ben Carson thing?
Oh my gosh.
Where it just
the biblical King David.
Compared him to King David, a man after God's own heart.
All right, Dr. Carson, what do you say?
Well, talk about distortion and lies. First of all, I never compared him to King David. I said if many of the people who hate and criticize Trump today had been alive at the time of King David, they would have said the same kinds of things about him because of some of the things that he was involved in. But God can use all kinds of different people for different occasions. And that was the context in which it was said. And never said anything about the second coming of Christ or any of these things.
I know that
they just take that and distort it.
That's one they want to throw in. I've heard that several times, and I've not heard anybody talking about that. But it is the distortion. But this is the leftist media, and you talk about disinformation. I mean, this is the ones who want a corner on the market when it comes to telling the American people what's going on.
Well, also bear in mind when you're talking about Marxism, and a lot of their policies and their ideology stems from Marxism, the last thing that the Marxists want is any other source of dependency or comfort than themselves. And therefore, anything that references God, particularly as a savior, is anathema to them.
Right.
And they will continue to attack it. And you'll see the attacks ramping up viciously as the election approaches.
I think that is a large part of it. I also think that the more they talk, the more we realize there's a total lack of biblical knowledge when we see what the media has to say and their interpretation of Christianity. But here's the bottom line, Dr. Carson, and again, you're Exhibit A of this. If you're going to step into the arena and you're going to encourage Christians to engage and to allow their faith to guide their vote, you just need to be prepared that the legacy media is going to come after you.
There's no question that they will. The way I kind of look at it, how long can they attack you and what can they do against the backdrop of eternity? So it doesn't really worry me too much. I just need to make sure that I'm in the good graces of God. I don't care too much about whether I'm in the good graces of those who oppose God and God's agenda.
Right, and that's...
courage. Courage is something that's so important to liberty because you cannot be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave.
Absolutely. And that's where I think as Christians, number one, Jesus warned us that this was going to happen. He told us that when we came toward the end, there were going to be those that hated us because they hated him. And
exactly.
There was going to be a lot of deception out there. And we needed to follow his teaching, follow the word, be in the word, understand the word, and be bold in standing up for it. I want to play another clip. This clip is from Vice President Kamala Harris, who was on The View talking about the upcoming election and the crazies. All right, play the clip of Kamala Harris.
It's unfortunate that that there are some who would deny fact or overlook it, when in fact moving toward progress requires that we speak truth.
I do believe we need to speak truth, but I'm not quite sure we're getting it from the Biden administration.
Well, one thing I've noticed about that administration is whatever they accuse you of is what they're doing. Projectionism completely. And you talk about not telling the truth. To sit there and say until very recently that there's no problem at the border. We have complete control of that. And when it reached the point where people were being sent from Texas and Arizona and other border states to New York and to Chicago and to various places, and you could no longer deny that there was a problem, that it was facing everybody. That's the only way you ever get them to admit that there was anything going on.
Right, right. But see, they have the media, and this is what folks need to understand, is the media is complicit with them. And so they're able to get away with these things where the media during the Trump administration manufactured I'll be a little generous. They twisted things to make things appear that were not, as opposed to what they're doing with the Biden administration. They're actually refusing to cover things just so it's covered up.
Well, I was a victim of that when they said that I purchased a $31,000 dining room table while trying to cut the budget for poor people. And of course, I never did purchase a $31,000 table. The whole dining room suite, which was 17 pieces, cost $31,000. That's a big difference. One table was for 17 pieces, which we never bought because, my wife in particular was upset about the prices of things. And she says, I know some wonderful consignment shops where you could get some quality stuff for a fraction of this cost. But the whole thing incited an IG investigation, Inspector General investigation, that cost more than $1 million of taxpayer money over a $31,000 supposed table that was never bought.
That didn't exist. But the media fueled that. The media fueled that because it was a narrative that they wanted to talk about. But when you talk about real policy issues like what's happening at the border, if it were not for conservative media outlets, it's just total crickets among the leftist media.
But I am actually encouraged by what I'm seeing with so many people not buying into the attempt by the left to use the Department of Justice to eliminate their political opponent.
Yeah.
Because if we allow them to succeed, America will never be the same again.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I've got this other clip I want to play of Kamala Harris to get you to respond to it. Clip number 9.
Now, are you scared, first of all, what could happen if Trump ever became, God forbid, president again? And what are you going to do to stop the crazies?
I am scared as heck.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm traveling our country.
Is that why you're traveling the country as well? You know what is at stake in this election?
That's exactly the reason. This is a critical election. We've already seen a massive switch in the direction of our country just in the last 3 years. Imagine what another term of that kind of philosophy would do. Look at the chaos that's going on in the world. We had a lot of peace initiatives with the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
There was obviously some semblance of camaraderie that was developing there, all destroyed. Putin was holding off. We've empowered him, quite frankly, with our energy policies, making his oil much more valuable and giving him the resources to carry on the kind of warfare that's going on with Ukraine almost indefinitely while draining our resources. China's being emboldened. Chaos is prevailing because we show weakness rather than strength.
So, Dr. Carson, you had a front row seat. You were a part of the cabinet of the last administration in the Trump administration. You were there from the start. Let's just say that we were in the second term of a Trump administration, do you think the world would be as it is today?
No. I don't think any of the things that I just talked about would be going on. In addition to that, we would have continued developing our energy resources, and we would be exporting large amounts of liquid natural gas to Europe and other parts of the world, not only supplying their needs, but helping to decrease our budget deficits. And I think we certainly wouldn't be entertaining all of this craziness that's going on in our school system, teaching children. I mean, I just feel bad for little kids today. The stuff that they're being exposed to, it was never meant to be.
Right.
And some of the books that we expose them to have things in them that would embarrass an adult looking at.
But thanks for bringing that up, Dr. Carson, because you have probably more than most an appreciation for education, public education, for the ability to have books and read. So when we're talking about these things, obviously for the moral aspects, we oppose these things. But if you are pushing all this crazy transgender nonsense and all this sexualization of our children, it has to supplant something else. So when they're doing this, they're not doing something that might actually lead to success, which, again, you're Exhibit A of what can happen when you have the opportunity for an education.
Well, in a recent survey, it was discovered that 77% of high school students in Baltimore were only capable of reading at an elementary school level. You know, that's going to impact their lives. And we're seeing those kinds of statistics all over our country. And when we look at the multinational evaluations, we have a tendency to end up very close to the bottom, particularly in science and math. These are things that are going to hurt us. They already are hurting us. They will hurt us more in the future if we don't go ahead and deal with them. And, you know, let school be school. And, but, you know, part of the problem, and we've talked about this on your program before, is the breakdown of the traditional nuclear family, which is where values are generally passed on.
Yeah.
So unless we can get that back, it's an uphill battle.
So, Dr. Carson, we just have about a minute and a half left. As we move into this, in earnest, the 2024 election cycle, as you know, we've talked about a number of issues here, but what are the top 3 issues that you say we have to get it right? We just have to get it right.
Well, we clearly are going to have to deal with the southern border, with, you know, just an open border with all kinds of people coming in, including terrorists. And if the terrorists aren't coming here and planning something really bad, then they're guilty of terrorist malpractice. That's a big one. And then the economy. We need to go back and understand what the underlying things are. You know, a lot of the economists like to say economy is just cyclical, sort of like a sine wave up and down. It doesn't have anything to do with what's going on. That's not true. It has to do with the fact that sometimes we have people in office who know what they're doing and understand the economy, and sometimes we don't. And so we need to deal with that. And then we need to bring back faith.
Yeah.
We need to bring God back into our society. That is the most important thing. The other things will fall in line if we do that.
I think you are 100% correct. Dr. Ben Carson, we're out of time for today, but as always, great to see you, and thanks so much for joining us.
You too. Thank you, Tony.
Dr. Ben Carson. To find out more, go to the website, TonyPerkins.com, and follow the links over. All right, folks, we're out of time for today, but thanks so much for joining us. And until next time, I leave you with the encouraging words of the Apostle Paul, found in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything you can do, when you've prayed, prepared, and taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.